बहुत इको होता है, तुम लोग को ऑलरेडी आ रहा होगा बस. Okay, so we'll start with binding energy semi-empirical mass formula. Now, semi-empirical mass formula, what do you mean by empirical and why it is called semi? These things we are going to see. So don't worry, I'm going to give you this technical idea also. Binding energy, yesterday we did solve a problem, and that actually had a very clear idea of what happens to the remaining energy. Okay, so that energy is taken away from the system for actually making the separating the nuclei and so on. So today we are going to go a bit deep into it. We're going to just continue with binding energy, but we are going to see that the expression for binding energy is actually a bit more complicated than we think. Okay, so looking at this, you might think that I might ask you to solve this, but don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to solve this. I've already solved it. Okay, I'm just going to discuss some things which are important. So the question says that you have to find the mass defect, the total binding energy, and the binding energy per nucleon of okay, I just there is some formatting issue of nickel. Okay, so basically nickel has got a mass number of 62 and the number of proton is nothing but Z, which is 28. So we have this. You have to find out the mass defect, total binding energy, and binding energy per nucleon. So yesterday we have already done the first two questions, mass defect and the total binding energy. We are just going to do the third part now. So here what happens is that we basically have see, some of the parameters will already be given to you. It's not that you will be asked to remember this value. Mostly not. Okay, these values will be given to you. So if you plot a graph, I think this graph you have already seen. I'm assuming you've seen. Even if you have not seen, we are going to discuss this graph more in the third and fourth unit. Okay, fourth unit also it's there, fission and fusion and all. We're going to discuss that. So don't worry. This is a very simple graph where you actually take the mass number. So you basically have the number of protons plotted along the x-axis, and then you have got binding energy per nucleon along the y-axis. Okay. Don't worry, if you plot just binding energy and not per nucleon, probably the nature of this is not going to change much. Okay, the nature will more or less remain the same, but binding energy per nucleon makes more sense. Okay, as we go on, we'll understand this. So you see, what happens is that if you're considering a very light nuclei, let's say for deuterium. Okay, in the next chapter we're going to analyze deuterium in a much better way, because this is one of the more simpler nuclei which we can use to study the nuclear properties. So you have basically deuterium, and what happens is this binding energy per nucleon of deuterium is just 1. Okay, and there are a lot of reasons for it. Doesn't mean that you can just take it out that easily. You still have to apply some energy, but that energy will be much lesser. But if you imagine something like let's say helium, so you know helium nuclei is very stable, 2 proton, 2 neutron. Okay, it's very tightly bound. So that means if I want to break this nuclei, I have to give a large amount of energy. That means the binding energy per nucleon will be high. So you see it's in the range of 7. So if the binding energy is let's say around 7 MeV per nucleon, that means we can say that it is more difficult to break it off. Okay. Similarly, if you consider something like carbon, or if you consider something like lithium and all, okay, or even nitrogen, they are having a high binding energy. If you go to more and more farther values, okay, more and more of A value, you find out nickel. And then I think some of you already studied also iron. So iron also lies somewhere here, Fe56. So iron is considered to be one of the most stable nuclei, and nickel is considered to be very, very tightly bound. So that means that whether it be iron because it's stable, or it's nickel because it's very tightly bound, also stable, the amount of energy that I need to put in to take out one neutron or one proton would be very high. And that energy is nothing but around 8.8 MeV. It's very high. Okay, it's around 8.8 MeV per nucleon. Okay, so it's very high. So that is the reason that this binding energy curve gives me a lot of information. Okay, so everything wants to become stable. So if something is very heavy, it wants to break into different nuclei and come nearer and nearer to this particular point so that it's more stable. If something is very light, it wants to combine with another nuclei so that more number of mass number increases and it comes near to this. So these ideas we are going to explore later, but this curve is important to understand the problem now. So the question is, how do I know that the binding energy per nucleon of nickel is 8.8 MeV? This is the calculation that we are going to do. I think we can do it. We have already done it yesterday, so not a problem. So basically nickel has got 28 protons and mass of each proton is this. So I'll just consider the U unit, not MeV right now. And then number of neutron is 34, and then we can take the mass of neutron. And then the next step is basically just to know what is the mass of the entire nuclei. Okay, the mass of the neutral nickel 62. So we have this. Okay, this is less than 62, of course. And then we get the mass defect. So we can do the calculations here, multiply this by this, plus this by this, minus of this. If you do the calculation just like yesterday, I hope all of you have done that calculation, you're going to get this result. Okay, so this is simple. Then what I do, I'll basically find out what is the binding energy. So I'll just simply multiply it with 931.5. So if I just multiply it with 931.5, the final answer that I get is 545 MeV, million electron volt. Okay, so that's the value of the binding energy. If you want to dissociate the entire nucleus, you want to take out all the proton, neutron, everything, you want to take it out. Okay, so per nucleon would be nothing but you just divide it by the mass number. So you just divide it by the mass number, you get the value 8.795 MeV per nucleon. So what happens is these calculations are done and then the graph is plotted. Now if you plot the graph and if you look into the graph, you see that this is the behavior of the graph. How are these done? Experimentally, of course. Why? Because if you want to know what is the mass of nickel, you use spectroscopy. Okay, we have already studied a bit about characterization technique in the last semester. We have not gone into that much detail of that. Okay, but there are chemical characterization techniques and all where you actually basically use the spectroscopy technique to know the mass of a material, okay, of an element. So if it is unknown also, you can find out the mass of that element and you can determine which element it is. These are actually basically nothing but even used in forensic and all. Okay, everywhere there is applications of that. So this is actually done and this is actually found out experimentally. So that means whatever result I have here is nothing but more or less experimental in nature. So in physics, you know that it is very important that if you have done an experiment, you have plotted a graph, you should actually have some theory for it. So many a times, I think I've told this numerous times whenever I'm teaching you physics, many a times people do a lot of theory work, they give the theory and then later on, some 10 years later probably or 20 years later, someone does an experimental work and they say that it is not matching with the theoretical result. So that means that that theory doesn't match with the experimental result. Obviously, experimental results are more authentic in nature for obvious reasons. That means the theory needs to be adjusted and changed. Okay, if there are no errors in experiment, more or less the experimental result will be correct. So this is correct. So what the thing is, I need to fit in a theory there. What theory? That from where does this binding energy comes? What are the different parameters on which the binding energy depends inside the nuclei? That is very important. Okay, so before I go to the next slide, please note whatever I'm teaching you on the slide will be a part of your exam. Okay, if this is the question given in your exam, I expect that you write down this answer. But this time, let me tell you, I'll give you some numerical which might be a bit twisted. So please make sure that you understand nuclear physics. Okay, okay, so don't worry, I'm not going to give the entire question like that, but at least I'm expecting that you understand it better so that you're able to produce it in a better way. Okay, so that is important. So this is liquid drop model. We are going to study about liquid drop model in unit 3, but here I'm giving you this liquid drop model one slide for the simple reason that you are going to understand about semi-empirical mass formula where some of the parameters are based on liquid drop model. So just a basic normal idea on this. So the liquid drop model was actually proposed by George Gamow. I think Gamow is someone whom you might have heard about because Gamow also gave the theory of alpha decay. Okay, Gamow's theory also made a better base for quantum mechanical tunneling. The thing is, if you're considering a helium nucleus and if you're having a uranium, let's say an uranium atom, and the helium nucleus is coming out of it, there must be some kind of tunneling. Okay, the probability should be there that the alpha particle should come out of the uranium. That idea, the theoretical idea based on quantum mechanics, was given by Gamow. So this was the same Gamow who actually has given the liquid drop model also. What does it mean? That the nuclei will actually behave like a liquid drop. Okay, for now, this much is okay. We'll actually elaborate it further in the third unit. But this idea was actually only given by him, but we needed more and more theoretical ideas, and this was actually given by Neil Bohr and Wheeler. So we have got the Bohr-Wheeler theory, which is based on the liquid drop model. Okay, so the all three have got contribution, but Bohr and Wheeler are known better for this because they have got a numerical expressions around. So when we consider a nucleus, it is nothing like it's just a drop of incompressible fluid of very high density held together by the nuclear force. So as we said the other day that the density is independent of the mass number, nuclear density is actually nothing but a constant value. Okay, so we are going to look into it, and maybe I can show you in this slide only. Very simple. So what happens is if you have got a nucleus, it will be very tightly bound. It is something like when you study your solid state physics. When you study solid state physics, you look into a simple cubic structure or phase cubic structure, and if you want to find out the distance between the diagonal and all, if you remember that lattice parameter, you calculate a is equal to root 3a by 2 or something like that. Okay, those calculation what you do, what you assume is that the atoms which are actually at the edges, they are very tightly bound. So nucleus also is having a similar idea that they are very tightly bound. Okay, and that is very important. So before I go to that, maybe I can talk about the density. So we know that density is equal to nothing but mass by volume. Okay, so mass by volume. So mass is something which is dependent on the mass number. I think this thing we already know, dependent on the mass number. So m is directly proportional to a. And then you can consider that, okay, how do I say it is proportional to a? Simple reason, you can consider mass of proton and mass of neutron. So if you consider the mass of the nuclei, it is number of proton multiplied by mass of proton plus number of neutron multiplied by mass of the neutron. But then proton and neutron masses are very close to each other, so we can assume they are same. So we can say if you just take the common, it will be mass number of neutron plus number of proton into mass, which is nothing but 1.67 into 10 to the power minus 27 kg. So that will be neutron plus proton. So that is nothing but A. So that means directly we can say mass is equal to A. Okay, it will depend on A, and then A into whatever value. Okay, so okay, so A into, okay, I think I'm too much on top sliding. A into 1.6, whatever is the mass. So let's say this is the mass divided by volume. Now volume is nothing but we already know it's pi r cubed. And then what is a radius? We know that r is equal to r naught a to the power 1 by 3. So I think in the first class itself, someone told me that density is independent of mass number. I think Ankita told that. So we already know that, but we are just going to see it. So r cubed can be written as r naught a to the power 1 by 3. So a to the power 1 by 3 whole cubed. Okay, I think you can do the sum here. This 3 gets cancelled, and then obviously we have just this. So this will get cancelled. We have got just a. This a and a will also get cancelled. So it is nothing but m divided by pi r naught. And what is r naught? 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 15 meter. So that means there is no dependency of a. So that is very important. So this theory is actually important to understand. Okay, so just rub this off. You can just do it on your own. I think I can actually ask a question on this, but I think it's not going to be very difficult. Okay, so we'll proceed here. So what happens is we have got a very high density of the nuclei, and they are very held tight, very tight, close to each other. Okay, and then this structure is considered similar to the structure of a spherical liquid drop. In fact, we are going to see that if you have a liquid drop and if you want to have two drops out of it, that will actually something which will relate with something which we call as the fission. Okay, so we have a heavy nuclei and slowly it breaks off, and we have got two different nuclei. So fission can also be described based on liquid drop model. We are going to see this. Okay. So liquid drop model is basically a crude model. So it is basically a very rough model. It doesn't explain all the parameters. This is something which you're going to see in the next few slides. So liquid drop model is there. It explains a lot of things, but not everything. So basically it makes a very rough prediction of the binding energy. So more and more theories coming up, more and more people trying to understand things. So let's go back to binding energy. So what is the mass of an atomic nuclei? We have got, for let's say there are n neutrons, and then there are z protons, and then there are a, which is n plus z nucleons. So So A is the mass number. So if you just write down the binding energy, okay, or let's say the mass defect in general, okay, this is something which is called the mass defect, right? So this is something which you already saw yesterday, okay. So I'll just consider M to be the mass defect. Z into MP, this is mass unit, this is Z into Mn, mass unit, and this is the binding energy, which is MeV divided by C square. So MeV by C square is again mass unit. So whenever you have any doubt, just look into the dimensional thing, okay. I usually do that, okay. So I also may make some mistake in the slide, so do correct me, okay, if there is any mistake or if you don't understand something. But right now I think this is simple. So whenever I write down binding energy by C square, I'm considering mass unit. So this is something which you've seen yesterday. We have already solved a problem on this. But then what is this binding energy here? What is this binding energy here? So this is binding energy that we are actually finding out. Suppose I don't know this term, I can just consider the mass here from the spectroscopy value, which is experimental. I already know the mass of proton and neutron again from experiment. These things can be done. Take the subtraction, you find out what is the binding energy. But then, do I have any theory for that? We have. We can also find out the binding energy, only the binding energy, only the binding energy, only this term, using the semi-empirical mass formula. So semi-empirical mass formula has got a lot of terms involved, okay? So we are just going to concentrate on this. This is the main agenda of today's lecture. We are going to talk about semi-empirical mass formula. The first thing is why semi-empirical? Because it is based on empirical points. So in general, empirical means from observation or from some experiment, okay? Some obvious, but you might not have a mathematical description for that all the time, okay? But then empirical is more or less from observation. And then it is not totally based on observation, it is also based on some theory. So the theory is that you have these ideas, right? Sometimes you might say that, okay, 2 plus 2 is 4 and you want to prove it, that becomes a bit difficult. On the other hand, you say that, okay, with time, your age keeps on increasing until and unless you consider relativity and all. Now, this is something which is nothing but observed, empirical in nature, okay? So that is there. So empirical formula, you should not get confused, because if you are using different books, which I'm sure all of you are using, okay, to understand things better, you'll see that they will use different terms, okay? Whisker formula, Bethe-Whisker formula, Bethe-Whisker mass formula, all of them more or less stands for the same thing, okay? And having said that, I think I should go to the previous slide and also tell you, here I've written M as the mass defect, somewhere you get the term delta M as the mass defect, okay, and so on. But this is not mass defect, okay? This is the mass of the nuclei, okay? Sorry, I think I told mass defect. Sorry, of course, that is wrong. This is the mass of the nuclei, okay? You just not the mass defect. So whenever you write down mass defect, you write down delta M. So this I was saying, sometimes I've seen in some book they've written in small m also. So it depends on you what you want to write, but it's better that you be sure that what you're writing here. Okay. So semi-empirical mass formula, how does it look? So this looks like this. So I have seen somewhere that this binding energy is also written as e to the base b. It is there, okay? So whether you write down e to the power base b or you just write down b, the important part is that when you explain it, it's important, okay? It's important that you write down what is this term. So where b is the binding energy. So you see, this binding energy doesn't look that simple right now. Of course, it depends on A. We have it, okay? We have it everywhere. It depends on A, but what are these terms? This is called the semi-empirical mass formula. In some Indian syllabus, undergraduate syllabus, this is there already, okay? So some of you might already know this, but let's just revise this because this is important. The first term is called volume term. I'm going to go into one slide each for all of these, okay? First term is called the volume term, okay? And I think let me just write down these, okay? Just let's read the terms one by one. The second term is called the surface term. So we already know the meaning, okay? The third term here is asymmetry term. Sometimes the Coulomb term, which is the fourth term, is written before the asymmetry term. So don't get confused here. The important part is you should not mess up the constant A, B, C, D, and delta. The constant should not be messed up, okay? Always remember this Coulomb term will have minimum value. Some of you have already idea about this. Coulomb term will have minimum value, and then the last term is called pairing term. Pairing term is most confusing, okay? We're going to study it better, understanding shell model and all. It's going to give us better understanding of this. So what are the values, okay? The last value is, okay, it's observable anyway, just read this too. So the value of A is 15.56. The question is, should you remember this? The answer is yes. Try to remember these values, because if you are using the semi-empirical mass formula in entrance and all, sometimes they don't give the value. Okay, this is expected that you know. I'll tell you a trick also. One more thing I'd say tell you, but let's just read the value through. A, which is connected with the volume term, is a constant 15.56. B is 17.23. C is 23.285. So this is the asymmetry term. Okay, please remember this. This is the asymmetry term. Coulomb term is minimum value 0.06, 0.697. What does it mean from here? It simply means that the Coulomb repulsion between the proton is having minimum impact on the binding energy value. This is the simplest way I can tell you right now. Okay, we're going to go more into this. And then we have got the pairing term. So we have got the pairing term. So pairing term depends on what kind of nuclei you are considering. So suppose there are odd number of protons and odd number of neutrons, the value would be 12. Suppose there are odd number of protons, even number of neutrons, or odd number of neutrons, even number of protons, the value would be 0. And then if there are even protons and even neutrons, the value would be minus 12. Please don't mess up with the sign here. If this is a minus, it basically adds up. That means if this is even neutron and even proton, the binding energy will be more. It's very obvious, because what happens is they form a pair. Okay, so if they are pairing, all of the protons are paired with proton, all the neutrons are paired with neutrons, they are more tightly bound. So it's more energy that will be needed to take out the neutron or the proton. So obviously this pairing term will become positive. But on the other hand, if it is odd, that means one proton and one neutron will be left alone. अकेला रह जाएगा, ठीक है? So उसको कोई मिलेगा नहीं जिंदगी में, ठीक है? So the thing is that will reduce the binding energy. So that's why this will become plus, so that if you put it here in the entire term, it gets subtracted. Don't mix up here, okay? The next question, if you have already, some of you have already studied about binding energy, you might have seen that the value of pairing was actually 34 or 33.5 and not 12. If you're thinking about that, or even if you open your book, sometimes you will see that it's written 33 or 34. These values more or less will be nearby. Okay, what is the reason? Okay, so I have used a different model. So what happens is, it depends on what kind of model you are using. So these semi-empirical mass formula is based on different models. There are at least 4 to 5 theories given based on which the semi-empirical mass formula was deduced. How do you find out the constants A, B, C, D, delta? You can find out by considering 5 different elements. If you have got 5 unknown variables, you can use 5 different elements, put the value, do your calculation, you'll be able to find out the constants. But then in some model, they have written this A to the power 2 by 3 and not half. So if this is 2 by 3, this delta will become 33.5. So if you don't get confused right now, okay, I'm using this model. In exam or for your own self-study, you can use a different model and you will see that this delta is different. But please remember, if this delta is 34 minus 34, 0 is okay, no problem. But minus 34 or plus 34, this A power will be different. So you have to take care of that. Please don't get confused, okay? So I'm just giving you this heads up because I've seen different books using different values. So based on this, you will see that all those values will vary slightly. They will vary slightly, okay? So what I suggest is you remember these values approximately, okay? Very important. So in place of 17.23, if you can just remember 17, more or less you will arrive at the result. For exam purpose, which I am taking, if you write down 17 and do your calculation, full marks. I won't cancel any marks for 0.23, okay? No problem. For entrance exam, again, the same thing. It's very simple. For entrance exam, they will give you 4 options and they won't be that near, okay? Because they also know that if you do the calculation, they will be slightly varying. So the order should be important, okay? Apart from that, you put the values. If you put 15.5 in place of 15.56, 17 in place of 17.23, 23 in place of 23.285, you are going to get more or less near the answer, whichever are the options. So you're never going to fumble with that, okay? So please remember this whole, you don't need to remember up to 3rd decimal place, 4th decimal place. No, okay? Pi का value remember करने के लिए competition नहीं है यहाँ पे. Just have to remember this. So this is important, okay? So during my MSc days also I try to remember this, okay? So just try to understand this here, okay? What do I mean by volume term? I'm going to come into the next slide and trying to explain it in a different way. Volume. First term is volume. What does it mean? That you have got this. Let's say this white one is proton and the red one is neutron. So this proton will be randomly surrounded by a number of protons and neutrons. They will actually form a volume, okay? So it will actually exert equal pressure or equal attraction, okay, in this case, because they are very close to each other and their nuclear force is acting here, equal attraction from all the directions. This is your surface term. Surface term, you see, these are the surface nuclei. Now you have, if you consider this as the center, you have got one on this side, one on this side, one on this side, fine, but you don't have anything on this side. So this brings in a different change, okay? That means the surface term is not equally divided. So this actually reduces the binding energy. This reduces the stability of the nuclei, and that's why there is a negative sign, okay? We're going to come into that again. Then what do you mean by D? D is Coulomb term, okay? So Coulomb term means if you, this is a proton, okay? Okay, so red they have considered as proton, sorry. So let's consider red as proton. So if this is proton, this will be 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 proton. So her positive charge ke beech mein there will be a basic repulsion, okay? That will be nothing but the Coulomb term. So inside the nuclei, if there is any kind of repulsion, that is definitely going to reduce the binding energy, or in other words, it is going to reduce the stability of the nuclei. So agar stability reduce ho raha hai, that means we are subtracting that part, okay? So that means we are going to subtract the Coulomb part. Next is nothing but your C, which is the asymmetry term. So if you look into the asymmetry term, you see this neutron, proton, okay? So sorry, proton, neutron, proton, they are forming pairs, but all of a sudden there are three protons which are alone, okay? They don't have any pairs to form. Basically this creates a asymmetry. That means the number of protons and number of neutrons are different. So they are pairing up, but then they are different, okay? So this is called the asymmetry term, okay? This also reduces the binding energy. And the last term is basically called the pairing term. Now pairing term depends on these three factors. Very important to understand this. We'll go into the last slide and understand this pairing term. But what do you mean by pairing? Pairing means proton, neutron is paired with neutron, or proton is paired with proton, neutron is paired with neutron, neutron is paired with neutron, and on. So they are having a self pairing. Okay, so that means that from these, what we understand is from this one slide itself, we understand that we cannot say that there is only an interaction between proton and proton. There is an interaction between proton and neutron also, because it's the nuclear force that is acting, which is charge independent. So whether it's a neutron or a proton doesn't matter. If they are coming very close within one Fermi or even closer, the effect is going to be different, okay? Very different. So that is also a reason that we have to include Pauli's exclusion principle when we understand this. Because if they are coming very close to each other, their energy levels are more or less getting intermingled. And then if you consider Pauli's exclusion principle from quantum mechanics, no two, you can say a similar quantum mechanical material, okay, in this case maybe a proton or a neutron, can occupy the same quantum state. So you cannot have the same values of all the quantum parameters. So this is something which is Pauli's exclusion principle, very important. So let's just look into one by one, okay, these terms, okay? This is very important. For exam purpose, maybe this will be a descriptive question, okay? And at the end of this class, I'm going to give you a tip on how to write down the exam, because I'm not very happy with some of the things that you've written in your paper. Okay, so let's consider the terms, okay? So first term is the volume term. So which one is volume here? This is your volume term, okay? So this is your volume term. So we'll just concentrate on this diagram right now. Next one is the surface term. Volume and surface we should consider always together. This has a lot of meaning. So what happens is, if you consider the assembly of nucleons of the same size, it can be basically packed together into the smallest volume. It can be packed together into the smallest volume. So basically, it will be packed into a smallest volume. And what happens is, in this volume, all of them will actually give an equal and opposite pressure on each other. So basically, there is a balancing term, okay? So each interior nucleon has a certain number of other nucleon in contact with it. So I know proton with proton and so on. So this nuclear energy is definitely proportional to the volume. So if the volume is large, okay, this is going to have an effect on the binding energy, directly proportional. But then this volume is the only term which is having a positive impact. Pairing also has a positive impact, but that is conditional. It depends on whether you have an even neutron and proton or not. But then volume is not conditional. This will be the one lone term which is always positive. Next, we have got the surface term. Now, this surface term is basically a correction of the volume term. We can say that. What is the reason? So if you consider this particular proton here, what happens is you basically have this proton, this neutron, but you don't have any nucleon on this side. So that means there is an uneven exchange of energy that is happening between them. Okay, it's not equal and opposite. Okay, as a result of which, because of this, and this, there are chances that this particular nucleon will try to escape. So if it tries to escape, that means it is making the nucleus weak. So that means the binding energy is going to reduce. And that is why it is called surface energy, because this happens on the surface of the nucleon. So these were not observed. Okay, you cannot take a microscope or a SEM or a TEM machine and then basically observe it under a high resolution microscope. Not possible. These are theory, and these theory are more or less empirical based on observation. We understand this. Okay, this is something like surface tension. Okay, so what happens is the nucleons on the surface do not interact with equal number of nucleons, and then this reduces the binding energy. Okay, this is actually equivalent to the liquid surface tension. It is approximately equal, not exactly equal. Okay, approximately equal to the liquid surface tension. So this is what is the volume term and the surface term is all about. It is very important to understand these terms. Okay, so that's why I just wanted to give you this brief here. Next is Coulomb energy. I think this is the simplest thing to understand. You have got proton. Yes, at a very close vicinity, there is nuclear force acting on that. But does it mean that the Coulomb force is negligible? Yes, it's very small, but doesn't mean that there might not be. If it's a slightly far, if the volume is large, if the value of A is greater than 20, that means the number of nucleon is greater than 20, the chances are that the Coulomb energy does exist. But then the value of A, or sorry, D, I think I've given D in Coulomb energy, is very less, 0.697. That constant itself says that how important or how enhanced the effect of Coulomb energy is. Okay, very important. So the potential energy from each pair of protons. So here we don't have anything to do with neutron. Okay, neutron ne bola proton tum apna dekh lo. I'm not doing anything with Coulomb energy, right? Very simple. So we have got the repulsive force. I think this is one of the preliminary idea we have in electrostatics, and the binding energy is definitely reduced. So not much explanation needed here. Let's go to the asymmetry energy. Now asymmetry energy actually is coming up from Pauli's energy, also called Pauli energy. Okay, so up to this term, this surface term, the volume term, the Coulomb energy term is all based on the liquid drop model. But this asymmetry energy has come up from the Pauli's exclusion principle. Okay, Pauli's exclusion principle. So this is important. So this is different. Okay, this doesn't come from the liquid drop model. So as physics progressed more and more, people try to understand even more terms are involved, and then you got this. Okay, so this is more or less a widely accepted model now. So this accounts for the Pauli's exclusion principle. I told you, you have two nucleons coming very close to each other. Their energy bands will actually come and basically try to split, for the simple reason that no two nucleons can occupy the same quantum state. Very important. Okay, so unequal number of neutrons and proton, if it's coming, this will actually result in asymmetry. Okay, what happens is the higher energy level of one type of particle will be filled up. So you have got more and more protons and neutrons and all, they will keep on filling up. We're going to go into more detail of this. Okay, so let's not think too much about it. We have got a lot of things to understand here. Okay, so this happens, and then this will actually leave some energy level vacant for the other type. So that means that will actually create an asymmetry, and this asymmetry actually reduces the binding energy.